What's up, guys? It is Modern Craftsman Monday, and this week we have a new show.
Monday. I can't believe you just rolled into it that fast.
Tyler always goes wild with it.
And I love it. The fact he didn't do it, I was like, what?
I was testing you.
He was cruising.
Yeah. Well, we have a new episode, obviously, because it's a new week, and we have Paul and Karla from a local cabinet shop.
Not to be confused with Bonus Paul and Bonus Karla.
That's another episode.
Yeah.
This is the Monday episode.
Oh, all right.
But cabinet shop, local to our area, and really digs into quality and, what I like to call the rip it out mentality.
I'm not saying anything. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be that. You're not going to bait me.
Why not? I try to bait John the entire time. Never picks up.
Didn't work.
Nope.
Next
Either
time.
way.
But
maybe on the bonus
there
episode.
is going to be another bonus episode. So.
Well, you can't just tell him now. Let's get into this one first.
Sorry, my bad.
All right. Guys, this podcast is brought to you by Duration Moulding and Millwork. Do you love the durability of PVC moldings but frustrated by the constant movement of PVC with changes in temperature? The answer is Duration Moldings, Millwork, and Siding. Duration is durable like PVC, but miter and butt joints stay tight so your craftsmanship endures. No need to worry about the darkness of paint color or utilizing special paints either. Bottom line, Duration is easy to work with, installs and finishes quickly, and looks just like wood. To learn more about Duration Poly Ash products, please visit their website at durationmillwork.com. Are you guys working from home?
Yeah, I'm at home now. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been working from home since March 13th.
Dang.
Yeah.
So what's the shop look like right now?
Lots of protocols. Everybody's got a mask on. I mean, the shop is actually a pretty safe environment. We've got great extraction system. Everybody's got their own bench mostly. Most of the tasks that have to be done can be spaced out pretty well. Mm-hmm. We rework the sort of circulation through the place. So we've got some established pathways so we don't get too much log jam in the circulation. People eat lunch by themselves. It wasn't very difficult during the summer. It's getting more challenging now that it's colder out.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been to our shop, Nick, so you may remember there's some, big doors right out the back, and they were open all summer long.
Yeah, to keep the air flowing.
Yeah. So the office looks like a ghost town, but the shop is full force.
So what beyond the you guys going, or the office going home March 13th, did the shop shut down for a little bit, or was it just immediate protocol and
we shut the shop down for 5 weeks.
Wow.
We didn't honestly we weren't sure what to do. I mean, the guidelines were pretty they were either incomplete or incoherent or both.
Yeah.
But we were pretty nervous about it, and we were fortunate. We applied for the PPE. For the PPP. We got it. It covered us for the 5 weeks. There was an unusual benefit, which was that the people in the office who were working from home continued to work without interruption. So by the time the shop came back 5 weeks later, there was a good backlog of paper on the desk to get built in the shop, and productivity was really high. It was really a pretty interesting situation. They caught up, yeah. But while they were catching up, we noticed that the shop could probably handle more work than we were typically supplying them.
Oh, so, interesting.
Yeah, so it was a little business lesson there as well.
Yeah.
Sure.
Bummer for them.
Yeah, I guess so.
They might be more productive when the office isn't there either, kind of either meddling or asking questions, or I don't know. It's pretty interesting not having us around.
I do find that when there's no one in the, like, there's no distraction. You don't come in to look at something or, hey, can you look this up? It's just you kind of head down and get things done.
Right.
So we're obviously talking about today, but let's, for those that don't know who you guys are, why don't you guys do an introduction?
We are cabinet makers, basically. We are a business of about 35 people. We design things, we build them, and we install them, and we finish them. We mostly make stuff out of wood, although we work with a lot of other shops to produce glass and metal parts for the stuff that we make and design. Karla and I are both trained architects, so we do a lot of design work with our customers. Our job still remains to supply work to the shop. So although we do a lot of design, it's all really dedicated to generating work for the rest of the company. And so, we've been around for a long time, 30 or 40 years, I guess, at this point. Mostly, almost exclusively residential work. We have the opportunity to work. I mean, this sounds a little bit inflated, but I think we've had the chance to work on some of the finest houses in the country, which is a wonderful opportunity. It's been an amazing experience and continues to be. So.
You say country, so you guys are working, coast to coast?
Most of our work is in New England, the large portion of it, but we also, we have a job we're installing in Florida right now. We just finished 2 sizable projects in New Hampshire. We've been to California, Arizona, Turks and Caicos. These are places that our local customers sort of take us to.
Sure. Well, logistically, how does that work?
It's not as hard as you'd think. Most of the, we have travel to those places when we're in design development. Although, with electronic transmission of information and meetings, it's place matters less than it used to.
Sure.
In that regard. And most of the labor in every project is in our shop. But when it's time to install, we ship tools to wherever they need to go, and our installers get on a plane and do the installation. So.
Yeah, we hire movers to move the cabinets down. They come into our shop, pack everything up, like Daly and Wands, or I don't know who our favorite is these days, but move everything down there. It usually ships to the site a couple weeks before we are ready to install. Ship the tools with the cabinets, and then our installers show up when they're, whenever it's ready to go.
So would that be?
What do you guys do for service calls?
Try not to have any.
It's like, I need this hinge adjusted. Hold on.
I know. Well, every one of these projects has a general contractor, and we usually get into very cooperative relationships with them. And our biggest out-of-state market is probably Florida. So sometimes if we're going down to Florida to install a job, and we know that something needs to be tweaked on another one, we'll just go when we're there. But most of the time, the contractor can fill in for us if need be, or send something to us, and we take care of it and send it back. Every now and then we have to do a service call, and we just do it.
So what happens when a contractor comes to you and wants to install your cabinets? Is that a hard no?
We don't allow it. We used to.
That's a hard no.
It's not that we used to not make any distinction on this, but many, many years ago, we started to realize that there was this huge spectrum of ability in the contractors for installing our stuff. And some of them did an impeccable job, and some of them did an absolutely dreadful job. And, our name was on it regardless. So we stopped that, and we basically require that we install our work.
Yeah, I think it's hard for people who make custom cabinets who then can depend on somebody else to install them. Because I think that a lot of times when you get into custom cabinetry, there's so much of the installation is built into the design of the cabinet, so that it's a custom install as well. And I think that it's tough to kind of pass that off at that point and ensure that somebody's looking at that install the way that it was designed, so that it's kind of a seamless cabinet job. And I have always wondered how people are able to send their stuff out the door and then not worry about what happens to it afterwards.
Yeah, no kidding. We also have like specific nomenclature, and this part goes next to this part, and how things have to be reassembled. And so of course it's easier for our PMs to work with our installers who already know that, and they're familiar with the whole scheme of how it's going to go back together. But we sometimes have to, like on union jobs, we're not a union shop, so we can't install on those jobs, and in those cases we'll have to we send a supervisor, and the union guys will install it.
Or we had a job in Bermuda once. Remember that? And Bermuda has really strict labor laws. They really protect their workers. So we were not allowed to install this job. And so we sent one of our installers there to just supervise. And somebody caught him picking up a drill one day, and we got a phone call about it. So, but, we've learned ways around this issue, but by and large, we do all our own installations.
Paul, you've been with the company since the beginning, right?
Sort of. So in the late 70s, I started a company called Reidt Haigh. Alan Haig and I were doing still the same kind of work that is being done now. And at the same, right around the same time, Bill and Jim Kochman started a company, and we became each other's kind of arch competitors. And in the late 80s, Bill called me up and said, let's merge our companies. And a year or two later, we managed to get it all taken care of. So since about 1990, it's been Kochman Reidt Haigh.
So I want to talk about that. What was that conversation
That's a crazy
like?
phone call.
Yeah, like what these are always the rabbit holes that we like going down, because other people, right, listening to this, and they might get a call from their arch competitor, as you call it. What was that? Was that phone call expected?
No, I was taken by surprise. I know what motivated it though, which was that Bill and Jim had bought. Well, Nick, you've been to our shop, right? Mm-hmm. So those are commercial condominiums. So in 1987, Kochman Woodworking bought unit number 8. That's the one right at the end where you enter our place, and that they basically took on a pretty sizable mortgage, and a lot of improvements were made to the building to make it suitable for a wood shop, and they didn't have sufficient capacity to cover their costs. So they were looking to find a way to expand their volume. And one of the ways to do that is to merge with another company. And so that's really what motivated them. They were in trouble. Just didn't have enough work.
Like looking back, why do you think they decided to take on that, mortgage if they if they weren't set up to support it?
Well, it was it was 1987. That there was a pretty dramatic recession that occurred, and it started like days after they had closed on this building. So they had been anticipating maintaining their volume of work that they had historically had, but the marketplace contracted rather dramatically for them. It didn't for us. because we were actually a smaller company and we just weren't affected by the recession then, but they were. So, it turned out to be a good thing.
Well, Paul, you also, your shop was in the South End, and the facility that you were in, like the sewer would back up, and you were like
yeah,
hugely under stress to get out of the space that you were in. And it was like, oh, a brand new shop and we have tons of work. Okay. Because you were working in Nantucket a lot then, weren't you? It seemed like you just owned it.
Yeah. We had a little toehold in Nantucket then.
So you had tons of work and nowhere to, every time it rained, you had to be like, oh no, did I leave that on my bench? Is it going to get leaked on?
You're right. It's exactly right. So each company was trying to solve some kind of hardship. I guess you could say it really worked out pretty well. Kochman Woodworking was very, very unusual in that Bill Kochman, his job before Kochman Woodworking was he was a sort of field troubleshooter for Digital Equipment Corporation. So he had a pretty deep background in what was emerging as the sort of early computer technology. And because of that, a lot of, Kochman Woodworking was way ahead of the curve in bringing in, I think Kochman Woodworking had the first CNC equipment in the country, in this country. They had to go to Italy to get it. And Bill could program it. And, we still use the software that Bill wrote to develop our cut lists and stuff.
That's from the late 80s?
That was in the late 80s. Yeah. That's right. I think they had their CNC equipment earlier than that because they used to, before they bought the place in Stoughton, they had a shop in the Piano Factory on Tremont Street in Boston. Mm-hmm. And they brought some real forward-thinking production savvy to the business, because they were still a custom shop, but they were using technology that was more related to high production work. But CNC made that very flexible. You could apply it to custom. So meanwhile, I had just finished architecture school, so I was more design oriented, really. I had been a woodworker since high school, but I thought my career was going to be in architecture, and I had a shop to make a living while I was in school. So, brought design and production together into one company, and that's kind of been the character of the company ever since.
So the call was to merge you guys and bring the design side of what you were bringing to the table. Was that?
They just wanted our volume. They didn't care about the design piece. In fact, I think they saw that as an impediment to the sort of production mentality that they had. So,
but it was definitely ended up being a real yin and yang, and there was just so much sort of tension between the two because, Jim and Bill just wanted to set up an assembly line, and then Paul had this huge, horsepower of design. Like they didn't even know what a section was. They didn't draw cabinet sections. They just. Oh, you want that edge and that cabinet? I don't know. There are still Kochman Woodworking kitchens that we service that are 40 years old, that are beautiful and perfect. And, but then Paul and Alan brought in this whole design side to it. And so, Jim and Bill were always like the engineers, and they figured out this amazing finished space and, like kind of the facilities management. But then Paul and Alan brought in all the design horsepower, and people wanted that. So it was just I think it's just was a perfect merger.
So what took the 2 years to make it real? After that phone call, you were enticed because of the new shop and you weren't going to have sewage leaking on your bench. But what, through that process, what did that look like? Was it a long process because you needed to think about it, or was it just wrapping up projects? And
it was like dating. We had to get to know each other, and decide whether we could live as business partners.
Sure.
So, I remember for a period of, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months, the 4 of us would go out to dinner every Monday night. And, it was like, if this had been like a date, I would have just ghosted him afterwards, because I could see that there was a disconnect in the kind of perspective on what we wanted. I wanted design and they wanted production.
Right.
And yet at the same time, I recognized the need for production. I love the idea of designing things and making them having a shop that made them. I mean, I already had that. So I knew the pleasures of that. And I think they might have recognized the increased market potential with us. I mean, we already had a lot of wonderful contacts in Nantucket and other places. And we were starting to get known for design abilities. So I think, there were features from each side that were attractive to the other one. But in terms of like getting along, like personalities, it never was great. At this point in my career, I'm the only one left standing. I mean, everybody else is retired. So I don't have that little personality struggle anymore.
So,
which is great.
I mean, so what was the tipping point that made you realize that it would be, if you're constantly dating and you're kind of, this doesn't really fit and we kind of clash, obviously something tipped the scale.
It tipped over for me because I recognized as Karla already mentioned, the need to get out of our space in the South End was pretty urgent. And I also recognized the potential of the sort of technology that they had developed, and I wanted a piece of that. I was eager to learn it. And the tipping point probably came when I looked at all of that. It seemed really attractive, and then I kind of mixed that in with perhaps mistaken self-image that I was a calm and flexible person and I could learn to live with the personality issues. So,
which you did for 30 years. I mean, as an employee, I've known and honestly, all of your partners are wonderful, all different planets that they're coming from, but, Jim and Alan are wonderful too. So, you can't just say it was just all conflict, because it wasn't.
It wasn't. That's true.
I didn't think so. As an employee, I didn't feel like it was all conflict.
Was the structure of their company, as far as production, kind of the way that it always been, or did they just happen into that and grow and take on an overhead that more of a production mentality would just support the business? They
always aspired to, they wanted to be, I'm speaking now about Kochman Woodworking, but they always wanted to have architects as their customers. Bill Kochman actually always wanted to be an architect and, didn't get there. But this was one way that Bill always had an impeccable taste, and he had a good eye for things, even though if he wasn't a generator of design. So that made them very attractive to architects, and they tried to figure out systems that were production friendly, but had enough flexibility to be able to give the architects what they wanted.
Because it's tough to bridge that gap. I think that oftentimes you look at them as two separate entities, and there's not as much overlap between something being custom and production. I think that there's a lot of efficiencies and processes you can create to make that custom work more efficient. But I feel like I always look at production versus custom as two separate things that don't necessarily overlap. That's an interesting approach that, you guys were able to kind of bridge and take on.
I would say, I think you're right that there are there's a real distinction to be made between those two domains. But there's, it's like a Venn diagram. The overlap's going to be a certain size. And one thing that changed over the years is that overlap became bigger and bigger and bigger. And what I mean is that we started to make more of the components variable instead of fixed. And we just kept increasing the variable category. And at this point, we still have approaches and methods which reach all the way back to the original sort of production set of protocols. But boy, we've figured out so many ways to make them sing a different song. Mm-hmm. There are hardly limits anymore. So.
Which is funny because when we look at a podcast like we had Humphrey Munson on, where he's looking to hit a certain production and there's only certain options that you can have, and there's certain door styles and frame styles and kitchens, you choose from a handful of those designs. And I think a lot of that is to be able to mass produce and be able to hit a certain level of production. But that's different from what you were saying. You still want to be able to do whatever you want to do and not be bound by having things be custom or one-off, but integrate systems and methods that are somewhat interchangeable there.
When we first merged, Kochman Woodworking had a catalog of product, and it was just what you described. Here are 3 different door styles. Here are 4 different finishes. Here are the things we can put inside the cabinets. And even to this day, I think there's a poster in the shop showing what that original program consisted of. But what was interesting is when we got our businesses together, and I started saying, well, why can't we do it like this? I don't want it to look like that. Why don't we make it like this? And instead of Bill and Jim just sort of taking the hardline business approach, saying, no, this is our program, we got to stick to it or we won't be profitable. They loved figuring shit out. They wanted to think about it, figure it out. It's like, okay, if you want to make it like that, how can we make our system do that? And they just couldn't resist it. And so over the years, the original program just kind of disappeared, or it got so flexible that you could hardly recognize it. So it was an evolution, definitely.
Paul, if you removed the creativity and design aspect and we looked at pure profitability, do you think that the company would be more profitable if you were to stick with that original, here are your selections, we will build according to those?
Probably.
And I think that's,
what I
was going to say is, like, I feel that's where so many people get trapped. And I think this is, to speak to our industry and to speak to other industries, even talking to John Ward from Icon 4x4, we talk about the mass producing, in dabbling in, systemizing things. And Tyler is exactly right. You're kind of trying to bridge this gap here, but having, I feel as though a lot of people get trapped in that, realizing I can make more money if I just stick to the process and offer X amount of options, and that's it. And whatever the case may be, where everything, when you get to a level of customization where you're designing each and every piece every single time, and you're essentially, and many have said, you're doing it for the first time every time. And, there's a tremendous amount of work into that. And, I think, I believe that, your career in the 30, 40 years of doing this, it's allowed you to kind of refine that, where it's like, that's part of who we are. Where I would only assume that probably early on, maybe when you were supporting yourself in school, you had to make some of those compromises where you didn't have the liberty of just saying, I'm going to design every single piece and we're going to be profitable accordingly. It was probably a lot of give and take in the beginning until, I'm assuming here, but it's just, I feel as though that's the natural progression. You get to a point where you make that decision mentally saying, I'm not going to do this. We are going to stick to our guns. We're going to be creative and design every piece. And this is going to be a one-of-a-kind piece every single time. And you run with it.
I never thought of this before, but it may have been a feature of, merging companies and going into a company that had a much more production orientation and a much more sort of rigid structure for how things got done. And I felt like if I had what would seem in that system to be an outrageous idea, that I had to temper it a little bit. I had to figure out, how it might get close to my idea by slightly altering things that existed in that program or in that system. And so I think I learned almost indirectly and unintentionally, how to be careful about, knowing when to stop throwing curveballs and making sure that the bottom line had some health, So, and it wasn't necessarily because of profits as much as it was because I had to work with a bunch of people who had a set way. When we merged, I think there were only 4 or 5 people from my company that joined the new company. And the new company at that point was probably 25 people, 20 people maybe.
And
so
how many was your company before you merged?
At my company at its most was, I think, 9 or 10 employees.
So you got rid of about half of your people when you merged?
Yeah, I mean, more. It didn't take much when, when they had to work in a basement that would flood with every heavy rain. So they weren't all thrilled to change jobs. But I mean, we were all really young. People's lives were so in flux at the, we were all in our early 20s, and a few people came and, I think in the end, I think they had all the ones that came in with me were probably gone within 5 years. And right now we probably, I don't know how many, Karla, are actually original employees of Kochman Woodworking. We still have quite a
handful.
few.
Yeah.
So
why do you think those 5 left?
Some of them left because they wanted a more sort of artistic expression of making things, and they recognized that this was a more production world. Some of them left because their girlfriend wanted to move to California, stuff like that.
Always
that
causing
sort of
problems. Seriously, nothing but problems.
Not nothing, but
mostly.
Not nothing.
So when you joined when these companies merged, you said it worked out because everyone was kind of fulfilling a need, or this merger was fulfilling a need for everyone. Had you, prior to this, I know it was early on, but did you have kind of a goal or an end idea that you were working towards for where you would be when this came up, and you're like, all right, we could switch directions? Or were you just kind of making it up as you go, staying busy, trying to survive? Did you know what your company, or have an idea of what you wanted your company to look like long term before this hypothetical merger kind of reared its head?
None whatsoever. I paid no attention to that. I just liked making things. I liked thinking them up and making them. And that was, I mean, it sounds naive and innocent, but that was it. That was my only motivation. And I wanted the next job because I wanted an opportunity to make something new.
Which I don't think that may sound naive to a lot of people, but I know myself, I can relate. I know Nick and John can relate. And I think that's where stepping away from the profitability comes in, where you're looking to either execute at a higher level or do something that hasn't been done or push your own boundaries, where to think of, hey, we could be more profitable if we did this, or took a step back or simplified, it's not really even a consideration for you because you're looking to do better things. And I think having that design driven work, you can still make a living and you can still be profitable. And maybe it's not the most lucrative path if you have a handful of paths in front of you. But I think that it's that path that you took, it's just the one that people like us take, you know, that you want to be challenged. You want to try something more. You don't want to just be bound by processes and simplifying things and pumping out a lot of the same projects over and over again.
You know, this reminds me of when, it was quite a long time ago, but one of our customers this was after we had merged, maybe 4 or 5 years after we had merged. And one of our customers was a professor at the Harvard Business School. And we did a lot of work on his house, and he got to know our company really well. And at the time, Jim Kochman was trying to work on a finishing robot for our finish department. And the professor got interested in that project, and he decided to write a case study on KR+H. So he was teaching a second-year finance course, and he was basically, the case study is intended to help students understand how you make investment decisions that are a combination of sort of research and development and actual production equipment eventually. So anyway, he writes the case, and every year he would invite us to come to the class when the case was presented. And he thought it was kind of cool that, you know, all of his young MBA students could come in and see the actual owners of the business, of small business, modest business, but who had ambitious ideas about it. And we would go, and every year I would get this weird feeling that the students really had no idea what we were up to, because what emerged was this sort of general student perception, or whole, and I realized later that it's, you know, that it's common MBA student perspective, which is the reason that you start a company or the reason that you grow a company is so that you can increase its value and sell it. And of course, if business is your business, that's the measure of it. It's like, how can I make this work and grow and thrive and then sell it and go and do it again? And so in a way, that's a very creative endeavor. But it was, you know, I remember standing up in one of these classes saying, I don't want to sell my business. This is what I enjoy doing. Why would I sell it? And it, you know, and everyone was like, no. You just make the stock, you know, the share go up, and eventually you'll cash it in and make a killing. So this was an interesting moment for me to see the contrast between what I wanted out of a business and to see what a whole class full of MBA students would think about what to do with a business. I mean, even people I know, we have many customers who are, you know, excited entrepreneurs and do amazing startups, and they're incredibly creative, and the energy that they put into it is remarkable. But they assume that, you know, when they get it up and running well, they're going to sell it, and they're going to go on to something else. So, you know, I know this is kind of a long way around, but the fact is that I never saw, and I still actually don't see this kind of work as an engine for profit. I don't think it qualifies very well for that. I have always said to everybody, I would love to have a business where everybody can make a really secure middle class life, you know, get themselves sheltered and well fed and their kids educated. And after that, you know, if you want a lot of fluff on top of that, you're probably not going to find it doing this kind of work. You know?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think that also creates and cultivates a specific type of company. I say it all the time that, you know, for the way that I'm running my, in quotes, business, it's not a business mindset. It's not the way to make the most amount of money. It's not the most lucrative path. But if I were doing this strictly from a business sense, I wouldn't be doing 3/4 of the stuff that I'm doing now. I'm okay with it providing a lifestyle for my family, supporting ourselves, giving somebody else an opportunity to grow in this career. But from a business standpoint, I would venture to say that I wouldn't really even call what I'm doing a business, because it's I'm not looking to grow it. I'm not looking to scale it. I'm not looking to sell it. I'm trying to do what makes me happy and provide for my family. And I think that kind of grows and cultivates a company that your work can stand out, because you're not doing it for the paycheck. You have to stay afloat and you have to be smart, but you're not doing it just so that you can grow or you can sell this down the road, because then you'd leave the mistakes, or design wouldn't be so important, because that's not the most profitable path.
Yeah, I mean, that says it perfectly. That expresses perfectly the sentiment that I've had about being a business owner, being this business owner anyway.
Do you think the industry is skewed in kind of providing the opposite information, or at least in the sense of business ownership? And I think this might go back to kind of what I was saying before. It's like if you take two approaches, and Paul, I've never really heard kind of how that you outlined it in the classroom, is like you build a business or you scale a business to sell, right? And I think, those, I'm sitting here trying to think, like, how do we describe, like, how can we differentiate the two types of business owners, the people that are doing it like ourselves, who genuinely love this, and we're doing this because we get to wake up and do what we love every day, versus those that are in it for the increase to
I feel like from an entrepreneurial standpoint, this just wouldn't be the business to go into. If you were looking to make money, I mean, you could even look towards commercial construction as something that you could grow a business and then sell. But from especially once you get into custom, it'd be so difficult to grow a business. You can sell it, and I'm sure you guys could sell your business for money right now, but from 40 years worth of investment into this, if you were to amortize that and look at it from an entrepreneurial or business standpoint, it doesn't make any sense.
You're right.
Karla, you're shaking your head. Yes. Like, yeah, I know that.
Yeah, I know that. But it's also kind of having that outlook and aspect of your business makes the business very successful. So that has built, not to go back to our quality, what we were talking about, but like Paul, every step of the way on every project has made the decision, whether it makes sense to the bottom line or not, to do the right thing, make sure that it's the highest quality. If something has failed, take it out and redo it. And I think that has been a very successful business path. And is that going to sell his business for a lot of money? I don't think this type of business really gets sold in that sense, but it's made for a very successful business, with that kind of culture built into it.
So Paul, with that being said, what is the, you said
Nick's
that
going to make you an offer right now on the business.
I'll send you a DM.
Oh, your business partners will love it, Paul.
well, you said, you made the comment that you're the last man standing, right? Mm-hmm. So what's the strategy? What does Kochman look like in 10, 15, 20, 25 years? It's,
Well, I'm forced to be thinking about that a lot just because of how old I am. So, and I confess I don't have a clear plan for that. I have a set of values that I want to make sure are protected. I'd like the business to continue. I'd like the people who have worked to build the business of have some benefit from its continuation, and whether it's an ownership position or whether it's whether it's simply a matter of ensuring that the business is ongoing so that they continue to be employed. There's very little turnover in our company, so there's a lot of there's almost like a sense of taking care of your family. Many of us are parents, right? We all know that's kind of such a profoundly central priority. So that still operates for me. I don't have any interest in cashing in on what's been built. And so right now, I am active in the business as much as I ever was. Two of my partners are completely retired and they have no ownership stake in the business. And one, Jim Kochman, still has an ownership stake, but he's retired, so he's not working anymore. So, I have to figure that out. But my, the reason that I haven't been able to sort of structure it very well is that what I want is actually kind of unusual. I mean, if I go to a consultant and say, I'm ready to figure out a succession plan for my business, they're going to give me a bunch of options that mostly involve selling it to somebody else, or creating an employee stock ownership program, which is no small task. And it's really hard on very small businesses because of capitalization requirements. So, so there's not a really good model for what I would like. And that's probably why I don't have a good idea about how to handle it.
And you're saying what you want being unique is just kind of being able to pass the torch to someone that will sustain the life in what you've built with, no extra benefit for you doing so, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I'm secure. I don't really need that. So but even so, I have no interest in a life of retirement. I mean, I get to do such cool stuff every day. I can't imagine anything that could compete with it. So as long as I'm healthy and I still have my faculties, I'm going to be around. So there's some burdens of ownership. I mean,
oh yeah,
I have to guarantee our line of credit and stuff like that, and I have to worry about cash flow. But, but I don't. We have a financial officer whose job is to worry about that stuff.
Sure.
So, what are your daily roles now with the company? Being, that you're not doing that stuff necessarily day to day.
Karla and I really have the same job description, you might say, which is to meet with new customers, to generate design ideas, to manage projects, which range from small kitchen renovations to entire, 30,000 foot house full of custom cabinetry. So, we have some project managers, but the two of us spend, what would you say, Karla? How much time do you spend designing stuff?
A lot.
Yeah.
Most of my time. And I don't know if it's particularly high right now, but I spend a lot of time designing. I could benefit from a couple project managers too. So I have been doing a lot of project management, but I would say mostly I do, sales work and design and kind of figuring out pricing and getting sales launched and figuring out what we're going to do, and then hopefully passing it on to a project manager to execute it.
Karla, I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I'm going to make an insulting comparison. But, when people think about kitchen design, I feel like oftentimes they think, I'm going to go to Home Depot, I'm going to sit down at the desk, I'm going to give them the dimensions of my kitchen, and we're going to design, and I'm going to pick from the book, right? But obviously, like we're talking about something way more elaborate. Paul, you throw out a 30,000 square foot house full of cabinetry, which is ridiculous, right? But what is that process? If you guys are on that front line, you guys are meeting with new clients, I guess, step one, what's bringing them to you?
A lot of our clients are old clients. So we've already worked with them in the past, or their kids, or they know someone who we've worked with, or even like builders. We've been on a team with someone, a builder, and they have a new house that they want to launch, and they're kind of getting their team together. We have a bunch of architects that we work with that, they'll figure out the envelope, and we figure out we follow their vision within that envelope and support the other ideas that are on the first floor, So usually our clientele isn't also considering Home Depot and kind of the more stock.
Of course. I wasn't saying that it was the same clientele.
I don't mean to poo-poo that at all, because it's a perfectly fine solution to the problem. But our clientele generally is, has at least, they're very discriminating, very worldly clients. They have, they're working with architects and interior designers, and so either we're coming in to kind of establish what can be done, but Paul might work at it a little bit differently, but I'm mostly trying to understand, like, what do you like? What are your goals? And then from that, apply it to the space and kind of learn the language and come up with a good solution. So
most of your leads that come to you, it's not as if a customer's calling you up saying, hey, I want my kitchen done. It's more so either a builder or an architect or a family who has all of that lined up. Being that you guys are also installing, I feel like you need somebody else in the mix. You need that GC, you need the architect, because nobody's just reaching out to you. It's not like you're going to handle the kitchen cabinet fabrication, design, installation, and the remodel. Do you guys have people who come to you who are looking for kitchen cabinets that then you're lining up a contractor or setting them up with a contractor?
There are lots of forms of this. Yes, we always are working with a contractor. I mean, I can't think of a job where a contractor wasn't an essential component of the team. But it's really sort of interesting how sometimes contractors that we've worked with over the years know what our strong points are, and when they'll have a job where they think calls for what we have to offer, they'll bring us into the team. Sometimes a customer will come to us and say, you know what, I want to do a gut reno of my house, my second home, and can you guys help me put a team together? So then we're in the position of thinking through our acquaintances, architects and builders that would go well to make a good team for this project. So we actually have the opportunity to do team assembly for a few jobs every year. But I wanted to say a little bit more about there's a thread running through this that should be made explicit, which is that Karla was talking a little bit earlier about making quality choices all the way through a project. If that becomes the sort of essential approach that you take to every dimension of it, it may cost you in the short term, but it builds a company culture of excellence and discovery. And in the long term, that gives you a secure clientele. And the reason that I wanted to connect to that is I actually knew almost nothing about running a business until the Great Recession hit. And for the first time in my professional life, we saw our workload contracting dramatically. It didn't hit us until around 2012 or so, because we had a backlog of a few years. But when that hit, we had to go from being a 60-person company to a 30-person company. And I had to, I learned so much about the business nuts and bolts because I was forced to. But the point that I'm trying to make now is that what kept us alive during that period, what kept all of those 30 remaining people gainfully employed, were our old customers. The bulk of the work that we had during that really lean time were from people that we had worked with before, and they had had such a great experience. They came to us, and they did not ask us to bid competitively for which would have been a disaster because there was a real race to the bottom in those years. And that to this day is the case. I think in a given year, we probably are, I would say the majority of our new jobs have somehow connected to our existing customer base.
Which is
so what I'm preaching to make sure that your customers get, not only excellent product, but excellent process from you, because boy, did it pay off for us in many ways over the years in preserving our market.
Which is, and Nick, you deal with that all the time. I think we all do, but standing behind your product and redoing something or fixing something or creating more work just to get the details right, where you look at it with the amount of work that it can create, or the hiccup or the scheduling delays. And sometimes the customers don't even realize it, and you question, is this the right move? And I always feel like it's the right move. If you know that it can be done better, or it should be fixed, or it's the decision that you should make, it's a no-brainer. But it's tough to see when it's right in front of you, if you have that short-term mindset, because you're losing money. You're paying somebody to fix it.
Yeah.
You're having to redo things. Your schedule is getting delayed. It's a tough question, especially once you grow the company where you have employees, right? Because now it's not like it's just eating into your hours, or you're making less on the job. You're actually paying somebody to fix it, and you paid somebody to do it the first time.
Yeah, this is a tension that exists between quality and profit. It doesn't always exist as a tension. I think they can go together very well, but it's not infrequent where you're being. Every craftsman faces this dozens of times every day. Is what I'm doing as good as it can be? Is it good enough? Does it pass my standard? Could it be better? You have to make these decisions constantly when in your work, and whether it's the work that you're creating with your hands, or it's your relationship to your customer or your employees. These are everyday decisions, and it's not infrequent that profit and quality are at odds with each other, and you got to decide which side you're going to land on. Oh,
I feel like that conversation, and I said this earlier, it's like it typically happens in the beginning, but what you're saying here is that it never goes away. It never, I guess what I'm getting at is everyone says, just keep doing the right thing because the money will come, the profit will come, where it's like the reality is no, you're constantly going to question yourself. You're constantly going to ask if this is good enough. Does this pass my standard? And you're always going to eat and chip away at that profit in effort to make that quality even better.
That's an example of where their intention. But sometimes, let me look at it another way. In the shop, when somebody, a typical project, the earliest stages is somebody's going to pick some hardwood off a rack and start milling it. And then, they're going to dress it, and then they're going to cut it into parts. And they're going to be making judgments about the quality of the piece that they're using for this or that part. And that's absolutely ongoing every day. Maybe they know it's a project where we're looking for a kind of nasty, gnarly kind of material, and they're going to use a different set of standards for, whether they'll let that knot pass or not. Other ones, we're looking at a very refined piece, and a knot or even a tight grain discoloration might not pass. So we count on the people that are milling the wood to make those decisions, and they make them every day. Now, let's say they get a borderline something, and they think, okay, this project can tolerate a few knots. So the part gets made, then it gets made into a sub-assembly, and then it heads over to finishing, and finishing looks at that knot and say, this is going to bleed out. This is not going to be a good long-term solution here. This is going to be trouble. This doesn't really meet our standard. All right, the whole conveyor belt shuts down. Now, we got to go back. We got to mill some new pieces. We're going to have to pay a lot money to correct that mistake, or to correct that error in judgment. Let me put it that way. Mm-hmm. And everybody in the shop knows the costs of having to turn something around and go back to an earlier stage of development to correct an error of some kind. So one way of looking at quality is that it does not include the kinds of costs related to redo or work around a problem. If you get it right the first time, it's going to move through the shop in the most efficient way possible.
Paul, you say when everyone knows what the cost is. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that, let's say we find, so in our shop, we have sort of the milling and the benchwork areas. We have the finishing department, and we have the sort of last step, which we call assembly. And this is where lots of the parts get put together. And everybody in the company has the authority to reject something if it's not up to standard. And so sometimes, and it's not infrequent for Karla or me to get a call from the shop and saying, we're trying to decide whether to let this go or not. And if we go into assembly, that means it's already, whatever we're looking at has already had a substantial investment made of time and mm-hmm. materials. So, it's one thing to reject something when the guy milling it isn't sure and he asks us a question. It's another thing when it's in assembly and somebody says, should we let this go or not? And, I think our habit is to not let it go, because it sets an example to everyone. And what I mean, it's simple to understand. Everybody knows it without having it to be made explicit. You know that if something's already got finish on it and it's getting into its final assembly, it's already had a substantial investment of time. So everybody just knows if something gets rejected in assembly, it's a little bit different than if it gets rejected in finish,
sure,
or earlier. So
I guess as you said that, I'm sitting here thinking, almost how interesting it would be where everyone knows that if a part is in a certain zone, that part has this many dollars allocated to it. Meaning, if you're rejecting it at this point, that's $1,000 cost. If you're rejecting it here, it's a $2,500 cost. And the comment about everyone knowing what it costs, and I get it. You're talking about the substantial amount of time invested. But it's interesting to to look at it the other way, where it's the financial side of it, where I'm curious as if it would make people more aware, where there's a very real understanding of what that costs the company. And I think that
we actually publish a lot of reports that everybody sees every week. And one of the reports that we publish is rework. So we actually have a weekly measure of how much time anybody in the shop spent reworking something. And there's a dollar value to it.
I think it's dollars. It's not even just hours.
It's dollars.
How is that calculated? You know, is it something where they're physically clocking out and saying, I got to rework that?
Yeah, people
Something
fill
gets
out their time
rejected, they
cards.
have to remake it. They put it in their time card as rework, and they usually call it office rework.
Which means that the office fucked up, so we had to rework.
We had to remake it.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Cost code Karla.
Exactly. Karla changed her mind. No, but there's a lot of questions that come from the shop, and I just make it a point to always pay attention to every question that comes up, any flag that comes up, always listen to it and always address it and thank them for saying, I can see your point, but I think this time it's going to go through, because people catch things. And if you kind of slough it off early on, I don't know, I just welcome it. Anytime a flag is put up in the shop, these people are very experienced, and even down to the guys who mill wood, are most entry-level people. If they start noticing something, pay attention, because it's just going to get more and more and more expensive. So I just, that's why, like, when the office started working from home, what's going to happen, right? But there's still a lot of questions that come in. Can you come and look at this? We got a lift of plywood. It looks a little bit weird. Do you want to come and see it? And it's always yes. Always, listen to people's concerns and make the call. And once they understand that is, it's on our radar, we appreciate that they're like paying attention and stop everything. Let's make sure it's right.
That's why productivity went up, because you guys just aren't bothering them anymore. They're like, you know what? They're not here. I'm not going to ask this. You guys are just putting out junk now. It's like, it's going through, whatever. We're getting paid for it. Out of sight, out of mind.
Well,
not what happens though.
To Tyler's point,
there's another little side of that, which is that when all the office folks are just a stairway away from the shop, somebody in the shop is going to maybe not, they're not going to take the burden of the decision. They'll just ask the PM to come down and say, will you look at this and you tell me what to do? Mm-hmm. And now that PM isn't, now the people in the shop are having to be, they have to solve more of the problems now. They have to make those decisions. Yep. And I think actually, and I think this is a real feature of our company culture. I think that they are, if they have to fall on one side of accept or reject, I think they're going to be more discriminating, and they're going to be ready to reject if it's not just right.
Because now the liability is on them, right? Because they are the ones who said, yeah, this is good enough or this isn't. So I feel like if it were on that threshold and you're putting the decision in somebody else's hand, you're waiving that liability. So now it's on them. If it goes through and it has to get reworked, it's, hey, you shouldn't have sent this through.
That's right. I mean, that's actually the continuation of my point, which actually makes it even stronger, which is, everybody owns quality in the company. And now, with the office working remotely, the ownership of that in the shop might have just gone up a few notches.
I'm curious to know has the rework report went up or down since the office has been remote?
I don't think it's changed much. Do you know, Karla?
I don't think it has either. I know that I should look it up. She just sent it out on Monday. I don't think it hasn't tracked.
Well, I'm curious because, you said that like Karla changed her mind, right? Where I feel, the flip side of, the office being a stairway away is that when you walk the shop and see something come together, I'm picking on you at this point, but, you get to see something come together and be like, you know what? Why don't we change that? Why don't we make this a little bit bigger or make this a little smaller? When you see something, I do the same thing. When I walk through my shop, I'm watching things come together, and I'm notorious for saying, no, let's change that. It's not how I expected it to come together, or I missed it when we were reviewing the shop drawings or something like that. So that's why I ask. But the other side of it is, what is that, you say you publish these reports, I find that, in my experience, there oftentimes, and I feel like there's a hump to get over with people, but, and Paul, you just touched on it, everyone owns quality, but, I'm sure people don't want to do rework. I know that. We all know that, right? So where is that, what is that meeting like? What is that, when that report it comes out, I can't imagine it's disciplinary. I'm sure it's, trying to understand, but what is it? What's the purpose of the report, and what's that, review and meeting of the report like?
The report is not, we don't have a meeting specifically to review the report. It's mostly there for the project managers and the shop manager to sort of monitor this, how these things are going. And so if it goes up, it's more going to be that Karla and Nick Decker, who manages the shop, and I might say, what's up with this? How did this happen? Or what was that? And sometimes it'll go up because there's one anomaly that distorts it. I mean, it could be as simple as, something expensive got dropped by the installer on site and it had to get rebuilt or something, and that's a really expensive thing, and it distorts the cost for that week. But so we know enough to sort of measure this with care. It's not as simple as how much is the rework this week. It might have been one simple mistake which cost a lot of money.
Sure.
So
usually PM mistakes can be expensive. If that knee wall that you showed in your drawing is here and not here, that can be expensive. And then you're reworking things after finish. When the installers find a problem,
that's big deal. Yeah.
That's big money. Yeah. So, I mean, it's sort of, the rework report is just sort of to monitor, who effed up,
Right.
And it's usually, I don't know, the big ones are the PMs, if something is measured wrong or the envelope isn't,
Right.
shown correctly in our drawings.
It's funny because, go ahead, Nick.
No, I was just gonna say it. It really is just a checks and balance. It's not a structure as to how someone gets paid or anything. It's really just, hey, we're going to publish this so everyone's aware of it and we can improve on it. Mm-hmm. And it's, more recently we built this kitchen and we built everything, and I'm sure you guys are going to laugh, but we built it based on the appliance specs. And sure enough, we put the appliances in and they don't, and we have this giant gap. And it wasn't, and the client was upset, and rightfully so. They didn't hire us to build a spec product. They hired us to build a custom product, and it wasn't custom fit. And, and it was this, we certainly wasn't a report, but we all kind of put our heads together and said, all right, there's really only one option. We're rebuilding it, but we need to understand how we fix this going forward, and we need to be aware of it. Just more than just understanding how bad this sucks right now. What system or what process can we put in place that next time we don't run into this?
There will be a next time, right? Yeah, right. Appliances are the bane of our existence.
Yes. I'm not a big Thermador fan.
Yale Electric is right there, and if they have it on their showroom, I suggest you go and look at it and see how the hinge works.
It's funny, that's what we talk. Appliances are impossible to get right now, so we have a kitchen project that we're starting to build, and they can't. And we were talking the other day, and he's like, I can't get the oven. It's 8 weeks out. I'm like, then find a showroom that has it set up, and go and we'll measure one. Right. We can't take the risk. We also can't wait 8 weeks.
Right. Yeah. At one point, Alan Haig was like, "We are going to bring in every appliance into our shop," and no, whoa.
Yeah. And then you realize
we actually do bring in a fair number.
The ones that are difficult to fit,
sure,
or that have screwed us in the past. It's like, well, let's make sure we get that in, but. Yeah, going to the showroom, calling around, and it's going to be somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
One that accepts a panel and just make sure it's going to work and do that. I recommend that. after being burned so many times by appliance specs.
You say there's going to be a next time. I'm sitting here like there better not be a next time.
Sorry.
So just before we started talking tonight, I got an email from the job we're installing right now in Vero Beach, and we have a wood canopy above a thermidor range, and we set it 33 inches above the range. And apparently the local inspector is reading the recommendations from the manufacturer, and we missed it by 3 inches. So this is, I haven't figured this out yet, and I don't know all the details, but it happened just before we started talking to each other tonight. And, here's an issue of a job that is, it's down in Vero Beach, Florida, and the installer's working away. And this has the potential to be, a real spike of rework.
Yeah.
I suspect we can find our way around this, but this business is so loaded with risks. When you're doing something for the, even if you're doing it for the 10th time, it's, every job still has novel dimensions to it. And, I have long known that when you do custom work, complicated custom work, profits are very fragile. Very fragile.
I'm impressed with
you
that.
can do everything right and still lose money.
I'm impressed with that inspector, though.
Yeah, looking at the manufacturer.
Seriously. I feel like I've never, most inspectors, especially at that point, it's probably getting close to final.
Paul's like, I just want to know.
Trip a GFI.
Yeah.
Turn the water on. All right, you're good.
Paul's like, I want to know who printed off the specs and left them on the counter when you showed up.
That's right. Yeah.
They were taped to the backsplash.
All those specs always go with our installers, so they were probably sitting there right on the counter.
It never ends, Nick. Just so you know.
No, I know.
But I was going to say earlier that once I have somebody who's experienced enough, it's the same thing that you guys are dealing with not being in the office. I oftentimes tell them, pretend that I'm not here. If there's a big issue or there's really a judgment call, come to me. But so many times during the day, you're coming to me just because I'm right next to you, or you're asking me a question because I'm right next to you, where it's fully within your capacity to inventory what's going on, come up with a plan of attack, and then implement that plan of attack. But it's just that I'm right next to you, so you're going to lean on me as a crutch, where you could do that yourself. And I'm sure that that's a lot of what you guys are experiencing now. And I'm sure that you probably have less rework because now they're owning that and they're putting that work out and it's on them, and they're probably fixing it before it gets to that point down the line where it's a really costly mistake. But I try that with people all the time. They obviously have to have the experience there, but you guys said that you have very experienced people in there, and they're probably more than accountable for those decisions and making the right ones at that point. They just haven't been put in that position before.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. I mean, there's probably a little business school essay here about, the consequences of working remotely in our kinds of business. I mean, part of what we do, obviously, it can't be remote because we make things for people's homes. But there are features of our work that, are sort of managing information or developing design that can be done anywhere. And it changes the balance of responsibility a little bit when you're not present, if you're not in the shop. And it will, we're going to see a lot of changes as a consequence of this, this long-term jarring change in the way we work in our businesses.
It's crazy to think you've done something for how long, and you think we need to be here, we need to be able to see this, our eyes need to be on this, and then you step away from it and things work out just fine, if not better.
Yeah.
And you just never would have even considered that.
Yeah. There's a lesson here. Yeah.
I have control issues. Not saying that you guys have control issues, but
So do
I
we.
might be able to
So
relate.
So do we. But I don't know. So far, so good. And nothing would have caused this to happen. I mean, how many business consultants have we talked to about the long reach of the office and keep hands off, and this actually made it happen, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I feel like it takes something like that where it's like it's out of your control. You got to back off. You can't that's sometimes just what it takes for that to happen, and for the better.
Yep.
Paul, earlier you said that you really didn't know about business until the recession. What
The tide went out.
Yeah,
That's
it
right.
just exposed everyone.
Yeah.
You got no swimming shorts on, right?
I was swimming along sweetly in high tide for 30 years, or 20 some years. But what I meant was that, there had been, I now know that there had been 3 recessions during the earlier parts of KR+H that were unnoticed by our company. We worked for the most affluent people. They were unaffected by these recessions. And many of them would actually put projects in gear during recessions because they would figure they could get better value at those times. And so we never experienced any effect. And so as a consequence, I spent the first 30 years of my professional life without ever having laid anybody off. It didn't even occur to me. I didn't know how you did it. I didn't know how you made decisions about it. It was always growth. It was from 0 to 60 employees. And when the recession came along, we were completely unequipped for it because I had no familiarity with how to make personnel changes as market contracts. I didn't know any of that stuff. Fortunately, we had a customer who was a kind of private equity guy, but he cut his teeth in manufacturing companies. And I called him up and I said, we're in trouble and I have no idea what to do. And he basically gave me a quick course in, managing during a downturn. And he, to this day, sits in on our monthly financial meetings and gives us advice. We call him our guardian angel. So, I learned a lot, but I learned a lot from him and from the experience of having a business contract, which, was a hideous experience, but a pretty vivid education, I can tell you.
So are you continuing to integrate a lot of, let me rewind, is that in the back of your head basically throughout all of your business now, like approaching business from a standpoint that things could collapse immediately? Things will not collapse immediately for our kind of work. And that's because I would say, our from initiating a project to completing it can run from anywhere from a long of 3 or 4 years to a short of maybe no shorter than a year. So if there's a downturn, we're going to have a backlog that protects us from immediate turnarounds. But what has changed for me is to try and keep my eye on that pulse. I mean, of course, like all of us, I was worried when the pandemic hit and the recession as a consequence, and yet I kind of quickly realized that our sector was not going to be damaged much, and it hasn't been. So even though there is a recession, people are nesting right now. People are investing in their homes as much as they ever were, at least the segment of the society that's, that can afford to have their own home and improve it. So
I keep, I look out for it all the time now. And ringing in my ears is this little motto that I learned from our business guardian angel, which is that, we hire too quickly and we fire too slowly, or lay off too slowly. And we certainly did. We were really so reluctant to lay people off during that recession. It was just seemed like the worst thing to do. And yet it was so necessary to preserve the business.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, if there were, what the takeaways were from that. I guess what I'm kind of getting at is, I think that this slight hiccup with the economy and COVID and the pandemic coming, I think that a lot of people initially kind of hunkered down, and they were ready to reduce cut the fat, reduce their overhead and tighten up, and then things got crazy again. And we've always said that I've been in business for 10 years. Nick's been in business for less than me. John just started his business. So we haven't experienced anything like that. And it's almost like the sting of the pandemic wasn't long enough for us to truly learn our lessons. And the takeaways, we don't have these valuable takeaways where, hey, we didn't have any cash flow. We had to lay off half the company. It was so quick, and then everything bounced back twofold that there's not that much of a takeaway from all of this. And I feel like the sting wasn't bad enough for it to prolong and last, and us to truly learn a lesson from it.
Dude, they gave us a free 5-week vacation. They even paid us for it.
I wish I took off.
That was never the case decades
and Paul
ago.
and I worked the entire time.
I know.
No, most business owners did, but there's a whole market of people that took an opportunity for unemployment and the bump that the government gave them to not come back. I don't think that's a lot of our employees, but I know it was a lot of subs that we had that they were affected by their workflow and their workforce because of that.
I wish I took 5 weeks off. I want a vacation so bad, and everything's closing back down now. They're like, you can't do anything. Like, I feel like I missed my opportunity, right?
Yeah, everyone should have just taken a vacation. Now it's like everyone's begging to go away.
Yeah.
To go away with your family. You've been with your family for the last how many months?
Yep.
You almost just want to all go to a different spot.
Yeah.
You can help us put that hood down in your feet, can't you?
Sure.
That's true.
We need a consultant.
Bring all the kids down.
So, Paul,
I wanted to say one thing about what we learned from this fellow, and Paul, you can probably elaborate, but I will say the things that we learned, that we practice every day, is don't do anything on your own dime. Get a huge get a substantial deposit and use your customers' money. Do not just foot the bill. Don't, just always invoice, and use the customer's money ahead of time. So when we send out a deposit, it's for 40% of the job. We don't do this little bits and pieces. Like, never get ahead of what they have given us in actual dollars in the shop.
Don't give up leverage.
Exactly. And it was this most simple, easy to apply. Our customers never push back on it. And suddenly we're not in a huge line of credit anymore, because all you have to do is ask them for the proper amount of money and report to them when we're ready for the next batch. We've gotten this far and we're ready for this much more. And usually they're happy to keep things running and do that.
Karl, I'd like you to elaborate on that, because I feel, and I think about a lot of our listeners, right? And a lot of guys that are starting cabinet shops or young, they're going to hear 40% deposit. Hell yeah, I'll take that.
All contractors just took a huge amount of money up front, spent it all like they had a ton of money, and then we're struggling through the end of the job.
Fancy trucks.
That's what I'm getting at. Karla, you said something really key there, is that report. So what is that? You're taking that 40%, but you're showing them progress, or they're seeing, they're not pushing back because they understand what that 40% is going towards, and then when the next draw request comes in, they understand that, wow, they have completed 40%. So what is that, as much as you can elaborate on?
Well, they don't really call us on it, in the sense that, so when we launch a project, we probably do some office time and some design development on our own dime. So I shouldn't say that we don't, but we have different ways of dealing with that. Sometimes we bill out by the hour for design. So there's that sort of aspect of our business. But, and so we do PMs sometimes operate on our dime before we get a deposit. But typically I think it's 40%. When we sign a contract, we expect a 40% deposit. There's a lot of upfront costs for us, in the sense that we have to order material to even get started. Right. So, and that's a huge part of launching a project is, okay, we know what we're doing. We know we want this oak. We know we need this much of it. Let's secure it. So, that's part of the 40%. And, some of the office costs should probably only be about 15% of the overall cost of our job. So so that's included in there, as well as materials. And so that's our initial deposit to then move on in the shop. And then I think there's smaller chunks, 40%, I don't know. And then there's like a substantial completion, or no, I guess we do have a couple waypoints, depending how big the project is.
Sure.
As we're working along in the shop. And then completion of fabrication is another big one, where we want almost everything except for install. And then of course we have to leave a final deposit until they're happy. Right. So, but we've completely swayed what those percentages are, and sway them in your favor. So, that the 40% was something that this fellow told us, and we were like, whoa. And we haven't gotten any pushback on it. At least I don't think I have, Paul. Have you? I don't know. But
every now and then I will. And if somebody pushes back, I just say, just tell me what you want to do.
Yeah.
But it's so rare that it makes it possible for me to say that. And I'm, and I have to say that in terms of the money flow on a project, it's really a case of we're ahead at some point. Then the customer might get ahead at some point. In other words, we've invested more in it than they have. It doesn't last long, and then we'll get back up again in the lead. So it goes back and forth a little bit. But one thing that we did as a result of the last recession is that we instituted a percentage of completion type of accounting. And we know, and this, we did not used to register a sale until the job was complete. So we never really knew where we were at any given moment. Well, something was in process. But percentage of completion is a whole system of accounting. This is another thing I learned as a result of the Great Recession, that is for businesses like ours. And so we use that, and we know exactly where we are in every, in this sort of cash flow between us and the customer on their job. And, we have the numbers, and our financial person is equipped to provide that analysis. And the analysis that he provides supports what Karla just said completely. It's like, a simple way to think of it is, who's spending money on this project? Is it the customer or is it KR+H? At this moment, who's footing the bill?
Mm-hmm.
And our change has been to make sure that at every possible way, the customer is always footing the bill. The service is for their benefit. All they got to do is give us money.
See, but that's also so important, because that deposit is not necessarily your money. That's not, most guys take that or girls take that, and that looks like profit to them because they haven't started paying for the hard costs on that job. And it's nice to have that money in and know that that's not your money. Like that's a deposit and secured.
Important.
And, it doesn't, you don't have this false sense of having a fat bank account when actually, you know, 30 grand of a $40,000 deposit is not going to you at all. That's going towards hardware. That's going towards hardwood, plywood, all of your materials, which I think most guys who take a big deposit up front, that's how they get themselves in trouble, because the job hasn't started. They haven't started paying out, and they think that they have all this extra money, and then they get into the job and realize, hey, I ate through all my profit. I got to start another job and take another deposit to get back ahead, and then you're in this this vicious cycle where you can't really get yourself out.
I think it takes a certain level of maturity and experience to dial this in. You know, just to understand what happens.
And you have to be at a certain scale to afford, you know, the accounting that it takes to really look at this every day. You know, once a week we get a report called Key Performance Indicators, and it includes how much money we're holding in customer deposits. It shows exactly what it is, and the message is, here's money that we haven't earned yet. You know, we haven't spent this money yet on production, and so that number.
So you're also not getting taxed. You're also not getting taxed on that for the year as profit. So that's rolling over as a deposit to the next year. So if something happens from a tax perspective.
Yeah, I mean, those, you know, I never looked at the numbers until the recession, and now I do. I'm, you know, I mean, I don't find it interesting, but I find it crucial to understand, you know, to making decisions, management decisions about the company.
Now, Paul, was that relatable to the size of like your original company when it was 10 people, or to the level of work you were doing with your clientele, that you just you were more of the artist, you know, in air quotes, than you were a business person, where it's like you're chasing that next cool job or that next cool adventure? And
yeah, John, it's still true.
I know. That's my notes. I feel like every day I create in the hopes to gain more experience, and that somehow I'll make a little bit more money. But it's never I'm in it to make more money and I'll gain a little experience and I'll get a job done. It's the opposite. The job is first, the experience comes, and the money follows.
Yeah, I mean, I think you put it really well. And yet the education from that recession was that it's not sufficient to pursue your enthusiasm and your interest and your curiosity. You know, I used, before the recession, I thought, you know, we were kind of misled in the sense that, you know, our curiosity and enthusiasm kind of just led to enough money so that we could still thrive without paying attention to it. And after the recession, you know, we had to make decisions about who to lay off, and we had to make decisions about when. You know, it's not like one day we laid off 30 people. You know, we laid off 30 people during probably over the course of, you know, maybe 9 months or a year. And every one of those decisions was agonizing. But as we, you know, we were starting to measure incoming work, we had this weekly meeting called Landed and Prospects, where, you know, we would give everybody in the company an accounting of what prospects had come in, what jobs we might have looked at that were, you know, possible jobs for us, and those that we actually had secured and we knew we were going to be working on. So we used that information to help us make decisions about the size of our workforce. And I had never had to do that before. It was, you know, before that, it was always like, how can we find enough people to deal with this increased incoming work? But when it turned it the other way, boy, it was a different set of decisions and a different understanding of running a business. I
think there's so many people right now, and I've been in companies that are just taking on so much work that it's kind of funny. My mom would always say, like, do you know how to balance a checkbook? And you're always just taking on so much that you never have to worry about the books. But I've always been taught that you always have to worry about it as if there's no money in the account. That's how you run a business, is that there's always none. Even though if you're one day having like I remember I joke about it at Middlesex Bank. There's one cashier that loves to take my checks because like, these are huge. I'm like, they're all gone. Like, it's not like I get to enjoy that money. He does when he deposits it, but it's like, it's not the case. It's you always have to run it as if you're bootstrapping it. And until you get enough of that information together or put someone in that actual spot to be strategic about how the flow goes, and then you can then go back to being creative, because it's always this, I feel like this jumping back on the boat onto the shore and then back off, where it's like, all right, let me figure this out. Let me now go be creative. I did that for 4 days. Now let me jump back onto the boat and figure out, am I sinking yet or am I not? And then jump back off when you get the bilge pumps going. You're like, I'm good. I'm on track. Jump back off. And I feel like that's how my business has been for the last 3 years. I feel like I'm always trying to do all those things until I can get someone that can captain the boat, get someone in the mechanics room, someone looking at how much fuel we have and doing all that stuff. So yeah, I can just get off when I want, go on vacation, come back on the boat when I need to, and then jump back off.
I think there's probably a moment in the growth of a business when, the businesses that we're talking about are these kind of, somebody founds a business and has to run all dimensions of it until it gets to a certain size. And, our business is making things for people, all of us here. And so, as we start out and we start growing, we're very focused on making things for people. That's what we do. That's our business. But at some point, there has to be an infrastructure for the business itself. My experience was I wasn't able to hit that until, I had maybe 10 employees. And then I could have somebody that was not there to make things for people, but was there to help sustain the business.
But how did you recognize that? Like, I think we're looking hindsight.
I mostly recognized it because I didn't want to file the tax returns anymore. For the first 10 years of my business, I did the taxes, I did the payroll with help of my wife. And, had to manage the time of the employees that I did have, had to order all the materials, had to learn software so I could sort of become computer literate in drafting programs. This was, you got to do everything, right? And at a certain point, instead of what you have to do to make things for people, somebody is hired to make the business run, or to help the business run.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I guess it's you can recognize that you're spread too thin, maybe. I think a lot of people that probably listen to this podcast just chalk all those things up to being a business owner. And if I didn't want to do all those things, then I should either go get a job somewhere else or change how I do business so I can have my nights. I mean, there's people that probably stay up put their kids to bed at 8 and then do 8 to midnight doing QuickBooks or whatever it is, and that's just how they've been doing it. So I guess my point was it a point where, I've also been in a bunch of companies where no one really knows their percentages. They've actually just thrown a dart at the wall and go, I charge 13%. How'd you figure it out? I don't know. It works. It's going back to that. I never really balanced the checkbook. It's just, there's always money in the account. So how do you get to a point where, were you getting enough influx of work, or was it you found that you recognize that, hey, I have so much work that I should up my margin a little bit, and that would give me I'm a numbers guy, so these guys will tell you, it's like, all right, well, if I have enough influx and I go from 13 to 17%, then I can hire that person to then take care of all these numbers. Was that kind of a calculated thing, or was it just like, what, be like, Nick, I'm gonna hire 2 people tomorrow and just make it happen, and I'll deal with the repercussions afterwards?
For me, it was less reasoned than you described. I was getting so busy that I was unable to to take care of my customers sufficiently, and unable to put my hands on the work the way I loved to do. And so at one point I remember, I think we probably had 6 or 7 employees. This was when Alan and I were partners, Alan Haigh. And we said, let's hire somebody to answer the phone, to process material orders, to, do all of the sort of management function that we don't have to do, that somebody else can do, so that we can spend our time making stuff. And that's what our business consists of. So the first person we hired was really an administrative assistant. And, we loaded up as much as we could, according to her ability and her ability to sort of understand and grow into it. And it was the first time where, I wasn't calling suppliers to order materials, for example, or keeping a purchase journal, or, so that's the way it started for me.
I feel like we all also kind of fib to ourselves and go, hey, we'll hire you as part-time to start, because that's what you're comfortable with giving up, and you'll make it work, honestly. But there's something about that not being so secure in what's happening. It's like, we'll give you 6 months and we'll see if this works. In reality, it's not to see if it works with you. It's to see if it works with me, and the finances in the company. No one, every employee doesn't get that. They're always like, oh, give me a shot. It's like, no, the shot's on both sides.
Yeah, that's really true.
I think most people are probably not as calculated in our industry. I think that most of the people who have a business where they got into this to make something or to create something, or it was more for the design freedom, their artistic freedom, they do it, and the goal is to get to a point where you can offload all of those auxiliary tasks and responsibilities of owning a business and go back to doing why you got into it in the first place. Like you get into it for a certain reason, and then you realize, holy crap, there's a lot of things that we have to do to actually sustain a business, and you start doing things that you don't want to do, that you didn't get into business for doing. And then you'd like to get to a point where you can financially be secure enough to start paying people to do all those business oriented things, and you can get back to whether it's designing or actually building or going and seeing jobs or meeting with customers, which may be the reason why you got into it in the first place.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it's important to, just to call out with John and Paul, Paul learning it from the recession, and John talking about, operating like you don't have money in the bank. They're essentially the same thing, right? It's like you're either pretending or you are operating that way. And, Paul, I feel like a lot of people choose to give up in a scenario like, a recession, where it would be easier to just kind of lay everyone off and kind of fold and maybe restart if things turn around. But to have the...
But I feel like that's today, because everyone moves home. And everyone will just, back in the day, that wasn't the case.
Well, I'm not saying, I'm not comparing it to...
This is all you had. This is all you could do to make money, and I'm not going to give up on it. So you would, leverage your house. You would do all these things to make it happen. And one of the hardest things would be to do is give up on some of the people you call family.
Right, but it's... I think, we're speaking to ourselves. I feel like, I can't speak to back then, right? But I can speak to now. Yeah, I think right now a lot of people would just give up and just move on. But the point I'm getting at is it's just it's a really good opportunity to learn a lot, and as you said, Paul, to learn about the business and what it takes to operate and be financially stable coming out of it. And implementing people and processes in place to really understand what it's going to take to not only survive this, but be prepared for what the future holds, and what the future holds. But not almost secondary to it, you're setting yourself up to be more profitable and successful when it is good, because you're putting all these things in place, and now you're able to to be agile, to be nimble with decisions based on how the company is performing. You can walk in the shop and realize that, this job is really tight. We're not looking so hot on this. Maybe I'm not going to choose to change that design because, as much as I want to, it just doesn't make sense. I'm going to throw this project way off track. And it's not necessary. But hey, this project's doing pretty good. And you know what? The microwave would look better if I moved it over a half inch. Let's do that.
I also think we're ignoring the fact that, on this podcast, we're interviewing very talented people. And I don't know if that's the case for the majority or the masses that we talk to, is that maybe the product doesn't stand up as well as, Paul's did in the beginning. That it was able to, we've glazed over the fact that you're one of the top cabinet makers in our area. And our area is saturated with some of the best.
I was hoping he would introduce himself that way. I'm the top cabinet maker.
I put in a brand new kitchen on a house, and it was one of my most expensive projects I've ever done, and then ripped it out to bring Paul into it. So it's...
Yeah, that's how we met, isn't it? That's the description, yeah.
It's not the most lovely situation I've ever been in, but it was definitely a learning experience. But I think thinking about talent is that, I'll relate it to hockey, is that there's some really skilled players that can effortlessly do stuff, and it gives them time to then focus on the books and et cetera. And it gives them time to kind of juggle family and everything else. Is that maybe you're not as talented, and this is a real struggle all the time. And it is harder to make that ends meet where you can go, all right, let me grab a bookkeeper. I guess my point is that instead of trying somebody 6 months and giving them a shot full time, maybe it is grabbing someone part time. Maybe it's some of these companies aren't sized where it's 10 to 30 people, where you can grab them for a Tuesday, Thursday, and kind of balance the books that way. So just kind of talking to people that listen is that we're not always 30,000 feet up. Let's just bring it down to 3 feet. And that maybe, it's worth talking to somebody. Like, I think Nick turned me on to the photographer. It's like, I grabbed the wedding photographer because they don't work during the week, to grab images during the day at the job site. And I was like, that's brilliant. And I feel like maybe, being skilled like everyone that we're talking to, maybe it's just that one epiphany that maybe you should grab the bookkeeper that's, maybe juggling 2 other things, but they're off on Friday and they want, to do that. And there's so many people working from home right now that they can probably juggle a couple things.
Right. Yeah, or the mom that wants to be home with her kids, but she still has Tuesdays and Thursdays to, contribute to something else. Then she would love to get out of the house, So I think there's so many opportunities for people to, the side gig, that
side hustle.
Yeah,
But it's we're all talking about getting back to our passion. Some people need to get back to it to really refine it. Mm-hmm. And to dial it in to make sure they don't lose money. Not be like, oh, I got to make this 150% amazing. Like they're just trying to get to 100 or even 90. And that they're trying to get to that point where, we fast forwarded this whole thing. I mean, I've been doing it for 3 years and it's insane, but some people have been on the same track. Nick, you're a prime example of, 4 or 5 years ago, you were putting up wainscoting and doing decks and sliding your level across, and it was cool to do. And now it's brownstones and penthouses. That kind of growth is kind of insane. But I also think, to categorize it for people, that's a different type of talent pool. And then using it and then taking a little bit of risk and capitalizing on it, but not so much that you're going to kill yourself in a market like this. And I think people don't have such a great market. So how do you do it? And I think it's just in small little increments. You don't have to always be this massive success.
John, there's a dimension of this that's worth mentioning, which is that, the success that comes to the people who bring passion to their work. That's why it comes. It comes because you want to make great stuff. You're committed to making the right choices. You're committed to quality in relationships and in the product that you produce. If you do not take care of, as you grow, if you do not take care of the business infrastructure requirements, like a bookkeeper, or somebody to help the business run while you're pursuing what you want and what makes your company successful. You're actually going to cripple your company if you don't deal with that, because you're going to use all your passion and talent, in interviewing people to hire, or doing the books, or dealing with the taxes, or who knows what. These are just features of running a business. But if you don't learn how to offload that, you're going to cut into the success of your business at a certain point.
I think you're 100% right.
And it's really important to I confess that I never really knew that explicitly. In retrospect, I recognize it now, but it's really important to stay focused on what brings you success. What is your competitive advantage? And if it's your passion and your talent and your problem-solving ability, make sure those features are supported by the business and not gobbled up by it.
Yeah,
that's the important thing.
I also think we've talked to some great people on here, including yourselves, that maybe you hire out the things you're not very good at. And that comes super hard to me, because maybe I don't want to give up on that I can't grasp at selfishly. It's like, just give me one more round, give me another job and I'll conquer that. And it's this, I don't know, it's a struggle. I feel like every day, I've been thinking about this quite a bit, is that, the craftsmanship part of it, and, focusing on passion. And I've looked at it, like, we've talked about this on the podcast quite a bit, and we joke. And I came up with a thing is like, when a surgeon goes into, an operation, do you think they think about the budget involved? Do you think that they think about, like, what's going to happen? Like, you know what, I could probably do this in 30 minutes flat. So if I get the 35, we'll just snip and sew it up and be good to go. I feel like there's a lot of that between craftsmanship and artists. I don't think an artist, like, you think Frank Lloyd Wright was like, you know what, I have 90 hours of design time for this thing, for Falling Water. And, should I incorporate the river or not? Like, this is where my mind goes, is like, to do what you want, I'm cool with struggling for any number of years. But as long as I can look back and really be happy with, that surgeon probably saved that kid's life because they took their talent and their experience to make that happen, and not about budget, time, and everything else and resources that went into it. It's the same as, Frank Lloyd Wright. And they think he was trying to create something amazing. He was just using his talent. So I want to use my talent because I've got it, and I want to, create something cool. And at the same time, I want to make sure that it's being valued. I think that's what it comes down to. It's not like, hey, I'm capitalizing on a buck, but for so many years, I've undervalued my experience until, like, you guys were like, we should probably take a 40% deposit. It's like, for people to hear this podcast and be like, so you guys have together, I don't know, 60, 70 years of experience, and it took someone else to say you should take 40%. And it'll change your whole life. And it's like, really? How did that happen?
Politics.
That just shows me that it's like, so it's not always going to come to you. It's not at 4 a.m. that voice that talks to you is not going to tell you everything you need to know. Might need to be, talk to somebody else, let them evaluate, let them in, and you might take something away that's huge. It's a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
That's good, John.
I can't drop it. It's attached to a.
You came in strong.
I love you guys.
I always wonder if you come up with these analogies off the top of your head.
That's I was thinking the same thing.
At one point, you were talking about, like, your whole analogy with the ship, and you threw in bilge pump. It's like, is he just making this up right now off the top of his head, or is this all?
It's so. Is it not right? Like you
it's
jump
right.
on the boat,
it's just very impressive. Like, I'm on Tyler's boat
like,
here.
I feel like you were sitting on that.
No, I wasn't.
I was like, when am I going to throw in the bilge pump
what's that
analogy?
pump called that you get the water out of? Bilge pump.
That's usually how I talk. I usually forget halfway through what I'm trying to say because my mind's on 3 different continents. But no, I did take notes. I think we didn't talk about bad talks at all yet.
Bad talks are in quarantine right now, sitting tight.
We should just get you a better Zoom profile.
Yeah,
so you can have a lot more people on.
Yeah, I know. We haven't had the bandwidth to pull it into that yet. There's so much cool stuff to talk about, but
where did they come from? Like, what drove you to start the Bad Talks? And for those that don't know, builder, architect, designer, you basically host this event where builders, architects, and designers are invited, and you have a panelist, and you
tackle a topic.
Yeah, you tackle a topic.
Yeah, well, it has an interesting origin. So one day, John Kilfoyle of United Marble and I were talking. He had just opened a showroom at the Design Center. This must have been 8 or 10 years ago. I don't remember when. But and I was commenting to him that, whenever I had been in the Design Center, the place seemed like a ghost town to me. He was like, yeah, it's really weird. I mean, this was when it was at its busiest, and it's still like, where are the people here? There's all this incredible merchandise and stuff you can buy, and there's nobody's here. And we were talking.
There's still like
about
tumbleweeds
business
blowing
model.
down the aisles.
Yeah, tumbleweeds were around, and But anyway, he had made a huge commitment to move there, and I said, why don't we think of a way to bring bring professionals together? And here's a great venue. It's easy. You can park here. It's a great location. So we had been thinking about. I had been personally sort of getting sick of networking events where you go with 150 of your colleagues in the business. Everybody gets to drink and talk to each other, but everybody's also busy networking, which means that they're having incomplete conversations and fragmented encounters with each other. And it used to drive me crazy because these events were populated by so many interesting, talented people. And every time I would go away thinking, wow, I wish I could have finished that conversation. So that's how we decided to gather in that group of people, builders, architects, and designers, and have a focused conversation about a topic that would be interesting to all of us. And that's how it started. And, really, to put it in the simplest terms, I just wanted to have a full conversation with interesting people.
And it sounds like a great podcast.
Right?
Yeah, I know.
Just a hint.
Yeah, I know. It is. These are people with wonderful things to share, with absolute font of ideas and experience. Something that, and I wanted it also to be shared in a way that was not competitive in the least, or promotional for anybody. Just to let ideas flow. So that's how it got started.
I think that's really important to note too, because I think that having that competition there could really, I feel like, change the dynamic. So ensuring there's an open conversation and everyone's able to contribute, and that there's no self-promotion or anything like that, super important for that entire environment.
I mean, don't you guys have the experience frequently when you get together and have these conversations all the time? I mean, it used to be called talking shop.
Yeah.
And that's really all the Bad Talks are. It's just a bunch of people talking shop.
Yeah, I mean, we did this exact same thing. And with social media, it opened our eyes to the fact that, like, Nick and I would get together because I hadn't left the company and he had clients he wanted to complain about. So we'd get together and people would be like, can you guys, record that? And we were both like, no, we absolutely can't. And then more people kept asking, can we jump in a conversation? So, going back to the first meetup, I think ever, was Nick and I got together in was it in Boston?
Yeah, Tony C's.
We're like, all right, we'll go. We'll have, open up to a couple people, and like 45 people showed up, and we were like, we ended up covering the tab between the two of us because we had no idea what we were doing, and we were just like,
we thought, we didn't tell the restaurant. We were just like a few people, like literally thinking 10 people max, and it was 45. The restaurant was like, what the hell are you guys doing? And we were like, no, we don't know.
We have no idea.
Yeah.
And so we covered the tab, and then I think we did that maybe twice, and then it came to us that it was like, I same thing, Paul. It's like you're having this conversation with this person, and it's like maybe Nick would benefit from hearing this, or Tyler would love this part, and I felt super selfish that I was enjoying that conversation, and it was just between me. It's the same as social media. It's like when people say they don't do it because they're too busy, but it's between you, the client, and the few subs that are on that job site to really experience that. When you have a window, this is like Back to the Future stuff. Like someone gets to look through a window that's in your hand, and they get to see into your time and space, and you get to somehow show them your passion in a few seconds. Like, why wouldn't you do it? So it was the same reason that we did that, and then we looked into some podcast gear, and we're just like, this isn't crazy, and let's record it, and let's bring these conversations with some of these individuals to the masses, and at least give people the opportunity to listen to it. Not because we knew people would listen. It was just we wanted to get the conversations out there. Same thing with Bat Talks. I loved them personally. I did everything I possibly could to make those, and I felt honored that I got the invite. I was like, whoa, who am I? Did I make it? Am I going to be profitable now?
As long as you take that deposit.
That's right.
And you don't have to put the bill on a podcast.
True.
Yeah, the bar bill on the Bad Talks got pretty serious when we were getting up to 100, 120 people.
Especially when you invite John.
John
was ordering
talking
stuff to go.
They got all right.
Paul, Karla, this was. Did you have anything else on your notes, John? Because I see you keep looking at the notebook.
I know I took a lot in the beginning. I think one of the things for you guys have seen a lot in the industry. What do you think that's changed? I mean, some of the things that trigger me is like custom and luxury. Is like everyone has that on their website, on the side of their truck. You guys actually are the image of luxury. This is what people pull inspiration from you guys to be able to do, home adventures, DIY, or even some stuff that's mediocre. So what do you guys think of the industry as it's changed? And is there a new word that I should be using besides?
Do not ever say luxury.
No.
No, don't go there. That is that sort of identifies you as completely outside of the category. It's funny. I saw, maybe you guys have seen this too, but one day I saw a van driving somewhere, and it was an electrician's van, and it said "Electrician to the rich and famous." And it was like, oh, okay, I know who you don't work for.
Yeah.
Well played.
So anyway, I think that all you need to do is to do good work, and you need to we had a few accidents in our history that made a difference. I mean, when I was a baby cabinet maker, and I had, how did this happen? My first job on Nantucket was because my younger sister's girlfriend's parents were building a house there, and they heard I was a cabinet maker, and they figured they could get some cabinets for cheap money. So we got this job there, and and it was pretty cool job actually, and we did some really nice work. And as it was nearing completion, the Jack Welch, who is the legendary chair of GE, who died recently, I think. But he was like a globally famous new leader of General Electric. He was flying his helicopter over the island, saw this job site because he was building a house too, and he made the way to the job site, and he looked in the window and he said, "This is really cool. Who made this?" And the next day I got a call from him. So it was this sort of completely accidental leap from a modest project for an unknown customer to a pretty extravagant job with a world famous business leader. And it was it was just as accidental as could be. And yet it kind of got our company into a level of clients that were there to support extraordinary work. Great work takes big budgets.
Now, were you? And I feel like I take,
you need.
I take on those projects in stride, but at that time, were you nervous, or were you like, can I produce? I guess, was there a question, and how much doubt came to you during that process, or were you like, I'm taking this and this is my opportunity?
Exactly. I had no doubt. I thought I would nail it. And the reason that I thought that was not because I thought that, because I knew what the options were. I mean, I knew what other people were doing. I could look around and see the quality of the work that was getting produced on these new houses on Nantucket, and I knew that we were more than capable of exceeding it. So I thought, hey Jack, you made a good choice here.
You're getting a steal.
Yeah. Yeah, I was probably making, $25,000 a year at the time from my cabinet making business.
So you're telling me there's still a chance for me? I have to get to the vineyard. Just kind of put a bunch of signs up, so something on the roof of the truck.
Nick already has that done.
You never know.
Too late.
Too late.
So Nick lettered the tops of his vans and trailer so that he would get customers like that. But I don't think that hasn't happened.
Yep.
It's for the city.
He just gets the helicopter clients. They just keep hovering over him.
Either that, or if like Channel 5, like 5 p.m. news when everyone's driving home, you see him on with the
Either
helicopter.
that, or pilots aren't that well paid, so leave them out.
Dang.
If you're in a high-speed vehicle chase, you don't know whose van it is. There goes the NS Builders van, leaving the scene of the accident.
I think you guys hit them all. Culture.
This has been fun, you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate you being on.
Yeah, I mean, what could be better than talking shop, right?
I know. I think you should. I mean, obviously, we'll see how things play out over the next couple of months, but I think you should consider a virtual bad talk and see.
Yeah, I think we should too. I mean, I've been thinking about it. I mean, all of us are now familiar with, this whole format. I mean, actually the bad talks, had some inspiration from TED Talks, and most of us know that from just streaming them.
Right.
I've never been to it. I've listened to many of them, but I've never been to one live.
Sure.
Same.
Yeah, I feel like you open yourself up to the ability to have people on from different areas that geographically you wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to if it was just local.
Well, my bad talk ambition was I'm thinking of how there's a couple of markets where there's plenty of the kind of work that we all do going on at a high level, and having a bad talk in San Francisco, in Chicago, in Atlanta,
Utah,
they would thrive in those places.
Yeah.
Sounds like something to do in your retirement.
Yeah, there's a plan there. Yeah.
Just gonna pass the torch and then start leading your bad talks.
Yeah.
See, that was easy.
That was easy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It finally got clear here.
It's me now? What? Wait.
Karla was
All
like,
right.
this is not what I signed up for.
You guys suck.
Well, either way, we appreciate you guys being on and appreciate what you guys do for the industry, especially with the bad talks, but just overall commitment to quality and consistently, looking to improve yourself and building really a family behind the company. And it's exciting to see, and I'd be excited to see, what you do plan for the succession, just to understand how you hold what you believe close to the chest.
Yeah. Well, let's have another conversation.
Yeah, you could probably put a fourth name on there, right? You could put a fourth.
That's right. Karla Reidt Haigh.
Oh, I thought we were going with Nick.
Oh, Nick. All right. Well, thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
thank you guys.
It was awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Enjoy
Good
your
night.
night.
Cheers.
All right.
Ooh, talking about bonus Frank. Lots of bonus Frank ones.
Oh, by
got-
the way, hold on. Bonus Frank walked off the job.
He did.
He gave it a hold on. Nick's Tyler's coming back, but yeah, he texted me and said that he gave it everything he could. He wouldn't be able to finish within the time frame they gave, and it went really sideways, and they walked.
How's he feeling?
He said he gave it the Modern Craftsman effort, so he put everything out there he could, and it just wasn't gonna fly. So he had to walk
That's
away.
tough. That's
Yeah.
tough. Well, in response to that, gentlemen, thank you for all you do for the construction industry. This podcast has shaped my thoughts and feelings towards my craft for the last couple of years. I'm 26 years old, and I have my own company, which I started in January, right before COVID. Tough times were to follow, but each of you constantly reminded me to put my clients and quality first, has enabled me to grow my business and my customer base much quicker than I ever thought possible. The bonus episode with Frank came at a perfect time. I was dealing with a very tough client. They never seemed pleased with my work or the work of my subcontractors. I was getting ready to go into their home for a final set of punch list items and saw that you guys dropped another episode. It was just the encouragement I needed to address their concerns with courtesy and finish the problematic job on a positive note. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I mean, we have another one. Oh, we got a 4-star.
Ooh, lay it on me.
All right.
It's probably my fault.
Let's see.
Oh, it is right there. I see it.
Episode 143 was probably their most useful so far. That was bonus
There.
Frank.
There.
I love the stuff with This Old House Guys. The one with Kevin is a highlight, or Spencer, or other pros who can share their stories. But 143 had some real coaching that I think a lot of guys could learn from. Hopefully they will have this format more often. Generally, the format is a little too chatty and repetitive for me. There tends to be too much pie in the sky thinking, as everyone has clients with a high budget and impeccable taste. I work in the San Francisco Bay Area, and some of that stuff applies to me, but more often than not, I'm just trying to knock out simple projects for middle-class people living in realistic situations with realistic budgets. Overall, I keep coming back to it, so it's pretty good. Hopefully you have more shows like 143, which I found more useful than the more philosophical content.
Pretty
That's fair?
good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. All right. So, hey, guess what? We're going to keep doing more of them. So maybe you can jump back on and give it a 5-star, Mr. Pretty Good.
Yeah. So on that note, talk is cheap. The folks at Duration will tell you that their best customer is someone who bought the product 18 months ago or 2 years ago, installed it, and then circled back to see how the product and their craftsmanship performed through the seasons. If you're serious about your work, take a serious look at Duration. To learn more about Duration Polyash products, please visit their website at durationmillwork.com. See you guys next week.